Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with another update to the U.S. 2022 midterm election House Representatives forecast. So, this at the top. I hate doing this because it's a bit awkward, but I have to report there was another bug. It was actually a relatively consequential bug. I'm not going to go into the great details. If you saw the Quebec update on Sunday, the same problem was in that model too, for the same reason. Long story short, I was indexing arrays wrong. Or, well, sort of. I'm not going to go too heavily into the software side of this, unless people really want me to. I suppose, but I don't know how much of the audience actually knows enough about software for that to be a useful use of time. But all that needs to be said is it changed things. Not huge, but it did. Oops. I'm ironing out these bugs now, for when we're kind of close to October and these results actually matter, they'll be better. No? I will say the reason why there's a bunch of bugs popping up right now is back in May, in the Ontario election, I started adding urbanicity to this, and all of the bugs that I've reported in the last little bit that I've fixed have been related to adding urbanicity as a consideration. So all of that is related to that, so that is not unsurprising. You add new things. You don't always find the bugs until you are testing your data, until you're running through it. So there we go. And I only noticed it because of comparing my model to other ones for the Quebec election. Oops. But now that that has been fixed, we can discuss what this has changed. So, long story short, I was pointing to the wrong demographics for some of the urbanicities. In fact, I could probably be very specific. Yeah, I was saying, and this is quite notable, that rural areas were actually rich people, suburban areas were actually the rural areas, and urban areas were actually the suburban areas. So I think you can understand why this would cause bugs here. So with that fixed, what has changed? Well, also some polls, but we don't really know what the polls movement is because bugs. So Maine is now too close to call, popular vote-wise. Edge Republicans, but it could go either way. Rhode Island is a bit firmer, but not significantly. Connecticut, the Republican seat is gone. We'll see how that goes. New Hampshire is slightly less safe. Not that you can see it, but it is. New York is about the same. New Jersey, the Republicans picked up a seat again. Pennsylvania, the GOP's picking up a seat and the Democrats are losing a seat. This isn't because of the bug. This is actually because I have changed the approximation for seats in Pennsylvania. After doing the Pennsylvania senatorial race, I had all the data collected, so I have updated Pennsylvania's seat distribution to a better approximation. I had every state has an approximation, but because of how complicated it is and how much work it is to get a really good approximation, since again, we don't have official numbers out as far as I'm aware, and if there is official numbers for what the congressional districts are, send them my way, please. I've not found them, and as far as my understanding is the official demographic profiles are only released following the inauguration of a new Congress, which would be too late. So all of these have an approximation. Well, they should be. Illinois and Pennsylvania have a very good approximation of what the new seats should be. We're going to see more. My next one I'm aiming at is North Carolina because it gained a seat. So I'm mostly focusing on ones that have gained or lost seats because those are the ones where it really matters. Because if you're, let's say, Iowa, yeah, the district boundaries get adjusted a bit, but not very significant. When you gain or lose a seat, That's very significant changes in how the boundaries are affected. And the only reason I'm doing North Carolina next is because I'm also going to be doing the North Carolina Senate race moment eventually. So, what others? Oh, and while we're here, North Carolina is now slight lead for the Democrats. Again, too close to call, as you can see, because it's striped. So, I wouldn't say there's a lot of uncertainty on this result, but this is one of the things that has been changed by, I guess, by the bugs I fixed. Ohio is now a bit less safe for the GOP. The GOP's picked up a seat in Michigan. Many states in the South and the Midwest are safer. These ones should be pretty obvious why they got a lot safer by the model. What? The big rural states are gonna go more GOP when I actually classify ruralness correctly? Who would have thought? The Democrats picked up a seat in Florida and Texas. I think that's one of the big ones where the model was bugging out, because in reflection, perhaps I should have noticed this. It was saying in Texas that very urban, some of the very Democrat suburby urban areas around Houston and Dallas were flipping, and it's probably not going to happen. It might. Probably not. Colorado is now slightly leaning GOP as opposed to being too close to call. That doesn't really affect anything in Colorado. The districts in Colorado are very polarized. So, barring me approximating them poorly, I don't really think that's going to change much unless you start seeing Colorado pulling out Wyoming numbers for the GOP, or vice versa. New Mexico is now safer to the Democrats, which again is the same bug pretty much. Slightly different reason, but same bugs caused this. Nevada is the same kind of deal. The Democrats have picked up 2 seats in California to the loss of 2 Republican seats. I guess that goes without saying, because no one else has seats. And Oregon is now allegedly slightly GOP. I think this one's erroneous, but as always, I'm not going to just change the result of my model. If it spits out something wrong, it's wrong. I can be wrong. I think this is wrong, but that's what it says. And Washington, the Democrats have lost a seat to the Republicans. I'm also not certain about this one. This one also might be wrong. Now, the reason why I think these 2 might be wrong, but everything else is safe, I'm confident, is I won't go too hard in the details, but it's how the west of the U.S. is, these western areas, this western region, is handled by model. I'm not terribly enthused about it, but at this point, I don't particularly want to completely change my the structure of the model for that, because I don't actually know if the changes I have in my brain would be better, and I don't actually know how bad this is. So we're going to wait and see November comes around, see how bad it is. If it's bad at all, it could be good. And then I might make adjustments accordingly. This is a moving target, forecasting elections. You can never stop. As soon as you say your model's solid, it's not solid. You can always make it better. There's literally millions of degrees of freedom in this industry? This job? I don't know. Millions of degrees of freedom. So, apologies. There's many things you can change. So, that's the changes. So, nothing terribly shocking. The Republicans are losing a bit of ground seat-wise. That's probably because of the bug. We go to PV table here, my beautiful, lovely Excel spreadsheet. As you can see in the last 2 weeks, what has happened? Well, really not that much. The Democrats are slightly more, gained some ground in the Northeast, gained some ground in the West. They've lost ground in the South and the Midwest. The seats sort of reflect that, though not precisely. They actually, seat-wise, lost a seat in the Northeast, but that's because of the changing in approximation of Pennsylvania. The actual popular vote actually really hasn't changed. Now, I will say some people have been noticing or concerned about the shifting in polls. I don't actually know if the shifting in polls is that credible right now. I've looked through many of them, and again, you'll see on a lot of these polls, they overrepresent Democrats in the sample. Economist YouGov is quite infamous for that. My understanding of YouGov itself is they just give the raw data to the newspaper paying for it, or the client, and the client weights it. So it looks like the Economist weights the YouGov data to wildly overrepresent Democrats in the population, which is a bit silly. You have all sorts of other ones, but you look at some good firms with good track records like Trafalgar or Rasmussen or Emerson, and you see, generally speaking, the Republicans are still clearly in the lead by those three pollsters. And yes, Rasmussen is showing that there's a decline in Republican support, but the other two really aren't. And even YouGov itself is showing actually the opposite trend. It's showing the GOP gaining support, though once you weight the sample representatively from Economist, it's kind of a flat. Like, if you weight the sample YouGov provides flatly, and it's for the last 3 or 4 weeks of YouGov polls, it's pretty much been flat tie. Slight edges here or there, but more or less a flat tie nationally. So, again, we shouldn't be that surprised. There really isn't a lot of movement at this point. And I think there is going to be quite a bit of polling error, especially in the wake of Joe Biden calling basically the entire Republican Party enemies of the state. That's probably going to scare people off pollsters. The pollsters have generally done a really bad job in the last, I'm going to say 8 years. Now, in the regards of 2012, sure, technically it was, that was technically 10 years ago, but 2012, we could say in the last 10 years. 2012, they overpolled Republicans quite heavily, but then they corrected that by overpolling Democrats over every single cycle. So, bad. In, like, significant misses here. Like, we're not talking, like, 1 or 2%. Like, we're talking, like, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 points. Like, that's just silly. Like, there was an Echelon Insights poll a while back, a week ago now, that polled Pennsylvania. And for the Senate race in Pennsylvania, they said John Fetterman was up 21 points. That's not happening. That will never happen. Right now in Pennsylvania, we will never see a Democrat win by 21 points unless the Republican candidate is literally, like, dead. Or not even necessarily dead, but is, like, literally evil. Like, going on the street shooting babies kind of thing, right? That's just nonsense. Or might have seen a lot of polls in Ohio showing that J.D. Vance is losing in Ohio. That's just nonsense. Like, I'm not even going to bother modeling the Ohio Senate race. It's just silly, right? J.D. Vance is an American First conservative endorsed by Trump in a state Trump won by 8 points 2 years ago. And every single possible thing that could go wrong has pretty much went wrong. Why would they suddenly flip on that? That's silly. Like, what? It's things like these that make people not trust pollsters, and when they get polled, even by credible firms, they don't respond, or they give bullshit answers. Like, this happens quite frequently. Trolling polls is a thing. I understand where that comes from, but I don't think it's a good plan, because then it makes my job harder. Don't troll polls. You make my life harder. But there's also definitely credible pollsters out there. Rich Barris at Big Data Poll, he's very credible. He's not always right, but he's good. The other ones I mentioned, Rasmussen, Trafalgar, Emerson, they do good. They have very low error rates. Sometimes they get things wrong, but that's to be expected in a probabilistic field. On the modeling side, yes, sometimes I have misses. Like, I didn't do a particularly good job in the first round of the French election. I was mostly right, but not close enough. That feels bad on my end. So, you know what? I'm not perfect either. But anyone suggesting that right now the GOP is not going to win both houses is just silly. Now, I will concede it's very possible it might be razor thin in the Senate. Or very well could be that it's not a huge blowout in the House. But the GOP should win both bodies. If they fail, that is a monumental screw-up on part of the National Republican Committee. Republican National Committee? Whatever it's called. All the fundamentals suggest they should win both. A very unpopular president. The economy is in shambles. Record high inflation. Jobs numbers aren't doing great. Median income is falling relative to inflation. All of these things suggest they should do good. Things like immigration and discussions on critical race theory are becoming bigger topics, and they're big issues for the GOP. Voters really care about them, and they don't trust the Democrats on those subjects. Again, that should be good for the GOP. Some of the Democrats' biggest pet issues, like Trump or January 6th committee, no one cares. The average voter doesn't care about those things. Roe v. Wade being overturned, some voters care, but the voters who care about that are almost entirely Democrats. Maybe that might motivate them to vote. That's very possible. But you break it down by voter affiliation. Independents largely don't care. Republicans, if they care, are for it. And Democrats largely care, but they were already Democrats, and typically speaking, party affiliate, you vote party 90-95% of the time. So that doesn't really mean much. If 80% of Democrats care, but typically 90-95% of Democrats will vote Democrat, well, that's not very relevant unless we start talking about voter enthusiasm. But by polling, Democrat voter enthusiasm is less than Republican. Maybe it went up a bit since June, but that's a bit murky. And it's pretty murky to link that to the Dobbs decision. So there's just the idea that some people have, that some modelers, some pollsters, that this might possibly, or some pundits even, not go to the Republicans. Like, everything is in their ball court. If they fail on this, the party should disband. And or like all the people on the committee should quit and give it to Trump, I guess, because they don't know what they're doing. You might notice that there are people such as Nate Silver at 538 who claim, quite ambitiously, that the Democrat should win the Senate. What? That's just nonsense. I won't get too much into that for now, but if you've been following my Twitter, I do have some of the key Senate races on it, and I'll just go over those. Georgia, flip. Nevada, flip for GOP. Arizona is too close to call, and Pennsylvania is flip Democrat right now. So, ignoring every other Senate race, we are at Republicans gaining one net seat, and there's one too close to call. But if that too close to call one goes Democrat, that's just a hold, so that doesn't matter. So based on the ones I've covered so far, we should expect the Republicans to take the Senate. And I will note, Arizona is trending towards Masters. So, And you look at other key races like North Carolina or Wisconsin. Wisconsin was one of the worst polled races in states in 2020, and one of the worst polled ones in its last Senate race. The incumbent Republican was forecast to lose in 2016, and he didn't. And he won by a decent margin. I don't know what it was offhand, but he won by a decent margin. North Carolina, the incumbent Republican is already ahead in the polls, so I don't really... Typically, the polls have been underestimating the Republicans, and he's already ahead in the polls, so it's just nonsense. As I said earlier, Ohio, no. It's not going to get flipped. Sorry. The Trump-endorsed candidate running in a state that went Trump for 8 points in a cycle where everything is against the Democrats, why would that flip? Why? And it's also worth noting, New Hampshire, possibly. That could be a potential flip. It looks like Don Bolduc is slightly down, but it's a possibility. And Washington looks like it's in play. At least if Washington's in play... if what's it called? If North Carolina's in play, Washington's in play. So... I'll cover this more in a different video, but that will be in a week or two, or a couple weeks probably. But so which why I'm doing this, touching this here. So overall, right, everything should go the way of the Republicans here. All they have to do is make sure they campaign on the right issues. Frankly, they could, as long as they hit on the economy, inflation, the southern border, and CRT, they should be gold. If they want to be a bit more ambitious, they can start touching on gender ideology, which is also a winning issue by voter for them. So, I will just have a break here for a moment and transition slowly. You might also have noticed recently, if you're watching this video, I assume you have, that Lindsey Graham has introduced a bill to ban abortion after 15 weeks in the Senate. And there's been a lot of people speculating that this is Lindsey Graham trying to sabotage Republicans. I won't actually necessarily contest that. I don't know enough about Lindsey Graham to comment, though I know he's not well liked by the GOP. Or the America First segment of the GOP, I should say. But I don't think the bill being proposed is actually that much of a damage to the Republicans as a lot of people are presenting it as. You look at polling. This is very stable. Pre-Dobbs, post-Dobbs. About 70% of Americans would favor a ban at 15 weeks. Yeah, 70%. Only about 30% think there should be abortions after. I'm going to rephrase this. It's about actually like 65% at 15 weeks. It's 70% before 24 weeks. So, almost nobody is against this. And all the people who are against this are hardcore Democrats. Independents and Republicans skew even more pro-ban at 15 weeks than the Democrats as a whole. In fact, if the GOP ran on this might actually be a winning issue for them. Because again, the vast majority of people, by polling, and this is very stable. You can look at pretty much any poll the last 4 months that has abortion in it. And this number roughly works out. It's about 30% want no limits, 30% want some, 30% want ban except for certain exceptions, and 10% want all ban. It's roughly stable in that configuration. As a general population, Democrats skew much more to full to no limits, and Republicans skew much more to total ban. That's not surprising. But again, I don't really see how this is actually meaningfully an issue. Other than potentially it might energize Democrat voters, but I don't think so. That's not really how things work. You don't really get energized to defend things. Like, you can do that, but that's not typically how voter turnout works. Though, the other thing that has come up in the news recently is Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has shipped a bunch of, I think it's 50 Venezuelan illegal immigrants into Martha's Vineyard. Some have suggested that this is bad for the Republicans. Mind you, some were all Democrat-leaning pundits. You can just debate whether that is a good idea to ship illegal immigrants further into the country, but this is very clever political move. It's, first off, if you were concerned at all about the first thing I just said, the Lindsey Graham bill, that killed that news cycle instantaneously. And second, it really brings up the point pretty hard, and it brings it to the point of these people who support these policies, and it really makes them look like absolute hypocrites and stooges and kind of frankly evil. Now, that last bit is a bit harsh, but you look at Martha's Vineyard, community says, we welcome all immigrants. No one's illegal or whatever. I can't remember the sign. And these are the kind of people who vote for these policies to stop the quote-unquote border wall or deportations. But then as soon as 50 show up in their community, they're like, oh no, we can't have them. They're going to change the character of our community. We don't have the resources to support them. Blah, blah, blah. Which is literally what Arizona, Florida, Texas have been complaining about for like over a decade now. So as soon as the problem was in their ball court, they say the exact same thing. But when Texas is complaining that people are just walking across the Mexico border into Texas and we should have a wall so we can have better control over this, you can't do that. That's evil. That's racist. What? Just what? And if the GOP campaigns and pushes this message, I think they will do even better than what I currently have them forecast as. Right now, their campaign seems very daft. Like, the Senate GOP spent a bunch of money fighting in Ohio. Why? You're not going to lose Ohio, guys. This one's free. I'm not saying you shouldn't spend any money defending the races, but like Ohio was one of the highest spending for the Senate GOP instead of places where they could flip like Arizona or New Hampshire or Georgia. But anyways, I guess to wrap this up here, right? This race, this election, should go GOP. Senate and House. I think most of the gubernatorial races likely should also tend GOP as well, or all the ones in contention. I'm not saying, I can't think of some of them off the top of my head, but let's say the California gubernatorial race, I think that's happening this year. I don't expect the Democrats to lose that one. But all the ones that are in play, I think will go Republican. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing most of the Senate races in play go GOP. Now, I don't think it's certain, and I don't think you should bet on it. But of all the ones in play, I think they will win quite a few. That's pretty much what's happening in the House right now. If you are a connoisseur of stuff like this, you might be aware of the Real Clear Politics polling average, and they have a map for the Congress, and they have it, I think, roughly 180 seats for the Democrats, 220-ish for the Republicans, I think something like that, and there's about 30-ish 34-ish toss-up seats. The exact numbers might be slightly off, but I'm going off memory, so it's approximately that. So what does this tell us? Well, if we assume that what they're doing in their projecting is reasonable, and they're just, Real Clear Politics just uses raw polling averages, they don't do any fancy stuff like I'm doing. I do a lot of fancy math, statistics things. Which is why, by the way, you can't take my model results and compare it, and aggregate it further. That's no longer scientific, because my model is a projection, but it's no longer based on statistics. If that makes sense. Like, it's not a statistically valid projection. You might be like, but doesn't that mean your model sucks? It's like, no, I'm doing things that mean the base sample size isn't representative of the, like, it's no longer a random sample. I'm doing it, and it's too complicated. I'm doing a bunch of things that break statistical validity of polls. But it makes you able to do projections and stuff. That's how models work. And I lost topic. Damn it, lost my train of thought. First time this happened. Well, I don't know what my train of thought was there, so we're just going to leave that closed. This is what happens when you don't do scripts and you do things in one take. So, no train of thought. With that, we'll wrap up the video. And if you liked this, by all means, like, share, subscribe. Oh, I remember now. Back on my train of thought. This is A+ content. Comment below if you think this is A+ content, so I know you actually saw this. So, their model, they're not model, sorry. What they do is they have the raw polling average. So, if they have 30 seats in play, that means they're too close to call. And they have a similar number, about 8 Senate seats that are too close to call. And the Democrats, Republicans are about 46 in the Senate for quote-unquote safe. So, what my model is suggesting is effectively I think it's actually 184 Democrat seats to like 216 Republican or something. Anyways, my model is effectively saying the Republicans will win about 2/3 of the toss-up seats right now, and I think they'll probably win about 2/3 of the toss-up Senate seats. So, again, probably early October I'll have a Senate forecast once I have done all the Senate races that I want to cover. Because again, I'm not going to cover like I'm not sure what all the Senate races in play right now, but my expectation is that the GOP will probably be around 52, 53 seats in the Senate. Though with that, I once again end the video here, and once again call you to like, share, and subscribe. Comment below what you thought, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right, if you think you see something that might be a mistake, because I'm not perfect. I have the quality control of myself, and if you've ever tried to edit your own paper, you'll know why that is not always the best way to do that, but I do not have funds to pay someone. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.